you also play musical instrument,
Yes.
right? How did it affect you?
Well, music always played a very major things in my life. I started to play the violin when I was 6 years old.
Yeah, wow.
So the notion of studying music seriously was there from a very young age.
Yes.
Music still, till today, moves me in ways that nothing else does. I can't quite say how it helped because people always like to brag about, oh, I know what things should sound like.
Yeah.
I go to the symphony twice a week and I know.
The sound
No,
of
I
the-
don't. I don't think that I know more than anybody else.
Why is that?
Because the what we hear is not necessarily what we hear. The process of retrieving audible information is very complex. It's a kind of a very basic mechanical movement that starts happening in the ear, but then it's the brain that is actually doing a lot of the
Processing,
missing,
yeah.
exactly, the processing, the missing links between the points.
Right.
And we all think differently. What you think you like today, tomorrow when you hear it, you may not like it. People think they remember how stuff sounds. No, they don't. Your auditory memory is about 20 seconds long. So you have to be very careful when you propose that you know better than others what things should sound like. I don't subscribe to that. I like to think that I have a reasonable assessment of what sound is.
Yes.
But that's not to say that it's any better than yours. Yes, I'm around music all the time. I
Right.
play instruments. My son plays instruments. So
Yeah.
there's always real music around us. And of
Right.
course, I go to the symphony a lot and jazz. I'm lucky enough to live in an area which is very rich in culture. So maybe you could say that it's reasonably to assume that hopefully I
You
know
the-
what
Yeah.
real thing sounds like,
Right.
but I don't think it's quite achievable in reproduction. Definitely not to the same degree. I am and always have been very sensitive to coloration
Yes.
and to non-linearity,
Right.
basically trajectory of loudspeakers. And that's part of the reason I was always tinkering, trying to kind of get rid of coloration,
Yeah.
make the speaker more linear, so I can enjoy the actual musical event as opposed to the reproduction event.
Okay. So that's your most ideal speaker is like then?
My ideal speakers
Yeah.
would be no speakers.
No speakers.
A speaker should have no sound. The sound should be on the recording. Anything that you can do or will do to the sound will just detract from that experience.
Yeah.
So my job is to move out of the way. Some people think that our speakers are boring because of that.
Yeah.
But if the music on the disc is not excited enough for you, then yes, perhaps our speakers is not for you. But we try not to add anything if possible. It's very difficult to do. I mean, it's easy to say, but to actually create a transducer, an apparatus with several transducers in them that will not add coloration is extremely, extremely difficult. That's what we are all about, and that's what we're seeking.
Yes.
When I sit and listen to music, I don't want to think about the speakers. I don't want to think about the system. I want to think about the performance.
Music. Yeah. So how do you manage to achieve that?
A lot of science. It's from the topology that I chose early on, building sealed enclosures as opposed to ported one. You probably know, I would say 95% of the loudspeakers out there are ported.
Yeah.
People like that extra oomph on the
Right.
bottom. That oomph is not real.
Right.
It's just not real. You go to the symphony, there's no pressurize the room.
Yeah.
I just heard literally on last Friday, I've heard Brahms Fourth
Yeah.
with Essa Pekka and the San Francisco Symphony. It's
really?
a big,
Yeah.
it's a huge piece.
Mhm.
I never felt my chest crushed or my guts
Yeah,
turning. You know, ported speakers can do that, and a lot of people like that,
Yeah.
which is fine.
Yeah.
But this is not how you create a true
Yeah.
transition of what's on the recording.
Okay.
So, seal design, building a very stiff yet damped enclosure, which
Yeah.
is a great difficulties
Right.
in many ways. I mean, most of the speakers out there are built from MDF or
Right.
some sort of a resin material.
Right.
These are the wrong. This is not how a speaker should be built.
Yeah.
Remember, a loudspeaker is a device that is actually transferring electrical energy to a physical energy.
Right.
It's not unlike a car, you know,
Yeah.
transferring one medium, petroleum, to through a combustion engine
Yeah.
to
Motion, yeah.
exactly, motion, rotational motion.
Yeah.
So the trick is to eliminate as much losses as possible.
Right.
So the transfer would be as efficient as possible. And in order to do that, you need to know your engineering.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we do in Magico.
Mm-hmm.
We put a lot of time, effort, and money
Mm-hmm.
to be able to build an apparatus that would actually be as efficient with the least amount of loss as possible.
You always think about the damping and so on,
Yes,
and vibration.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. That's again going back to the fact that you want a speaker to be quiet and not add
Right.
its own sound, i.e. vibration,
Yeah.
to the output.
When you make fully sealed speakers, it's not easy,
That's right.
you know, because inside there are a lot of vibrations.
Exactly. The same energy that you put into the room, you
Right.
put into the small box.
Exactly. So what kind of things do you do to remove the resonances?
We build an enclosure to be extremely stiff.
Yeah.
As you stiffen the enclosure, you push up the resonant frequency and you narrowing the Q of the actual vibration.
Right.
So, because if you have a wide Q, it's very difficult to damp. But as you push the frequency in, the resonances in frequency and narrowing the Q,
Yeah.
you bring them to a point where it's very, very easy to damp them. And we have the tools to see where these points are. And those particular points, we introduce constrained layer damping plates
Yeah.
that actually capture that resonance and transfer that noise into heat.
You use laser.
We use laser vibrometer to actually measure the speaker and see where these movements are.
What kind of other instruments do you use?
We have the Klippel NFS. This is probably the most remarkable loudspeaker design tool that was ever created.
Yes.
It allows us to do an echoic type measurement in a contained area
Yeah.
where we could see the speaker behavior on and off axis from 20 hertz to 50, 60K, depending on how we designate it. It allows us to predict where how the speaker is going to sound in the room. And we can do things almost in real time and see the results almost immediately. Stuff that was just not achievable 5 years ago. You couldn't do that.
Yeah.
And you'd have to have some serious real estate in terms of an echoic chamber to be able to do this kind of measurement.
Right.
And then you manually have to actually calculate all these points, which with the NFS it's doing, it's a robot. It just does it automatically.
Right.
So you let it run for, depending how many points you designate, but it can run, we typically run it overnight.
Yeah.
And you come in the morning and you could see which area needs to be addressed, how things are looking, and it allows you to create changes in a fraction of a time
Yeah.
it would take if you have an anechoic chamber. So let me ask you a question.
Sure.
How many high-end companies you think have an NFS in their possession? And I'm talking about high-end, not mid-fi, high-end.
I really don't know.
Okay. You know why you don't know?
Because none does.
Exactly.
Only Magico.
And I'm not saying that to brag or to be proud. I actually think that it's disappointing that we are the only company in our segment that actually uses tools like that.
Yeah.
Which, if a tool like this is available, I wouldn't. I don't know how you design a speaker without that.
Yeah.
Because of, I don't want to get into the technicality of things, but in a normal environment, below 800 hertz, it's almost like a black hole. You can't really measure a speaker without taking the room under consideration and understanding how it actually works.
Exactly.
So you never really see what it is that you're making. And now we are.
Yeah.
So we're at the point that when we are done with the design and I bring it into the listening room and I push play, I don't have to do any voicing. It's done. And it would perform to its ideal no matter where you put it.
Yeah.
Of course, the room will change things.
Right.
But that's okay. You can change the room. You cannot change the speaker.
Right.
So once you manipulate a speaker wrongly because you couldn't see what the speaker is doing, no room in the world would make it sound right.
Right.
But I give our customer a product that work properly in any room you'll put that, assuming you'll deal with the room. I don't know how anyone will design a speaker not having these features.
In your opinion, what kind of consideration did an audiophile have in mind for making a perfect room?
There's no such thing as perfect room. And honestly, I rather not even talk about it because room design, acoustic, construction it's such a complex issue, and it's a very time-demanding and costly proposition. So, yeah, I mean, people have the rooms that they have. They need to make the best of them. It's very difficult to build a perfect room. I mean, it's possible, but it will be an expensive endeavor. But you know, you have to work with what you have. There are things you need to take under consideration in terms of bass behaviors in the room, reflection, you know, first reflection, basic stuff that you can do to substantially increase performance without going crazy. But yeah, perfect room, that's a tall order.
But your listening room looks really awesome.
It is awesome. But again, it's not a listening room per se. It's a room that is built with a minimal room gain. So I can hear the speakers and not the speakers in the room. That's not necessarily the ideal speaker for listening. In a listening environment, you might want to get a little bit more gain, so your bass is a little bit more fuller sounding. But for our purposes, it's not what we are looking for. I need to hear the speakers.